in Spain, they dub each movie, so they have voice for Harrison Ford, for for Bruce Willis, for whoever. So it's the worst, but for somebody to learn, it's perfect. I mean, Bruce Willis here speaks in perfect Spanish to you. Perfect. Hello, I am boy Poland. I want with you in group together, right?
Thank you for the simulation of your broken Spanish. That was great. Hello, I'm Rodek.
I'm Michael.
And this is the podcast.
A sounding board for interesting ideas and insights. We discuss books we read and want to share with you,
as well as technology and productivity, which is what we do by day working on our app, Nozbe.
Or whatever else comes to mind.
All right, so let's continue talking about learning languages. And before we finish your story of how you learned Spanish and learned some Japanese and whatnot, I want to discuss the topic of developing an accent when learning a new language. So this is something a listener asked me in an email. And to be honest, I didn't really think about it before. It's just, I got to the point where I am now, but there wasn't like a super specific thing I did or a technique or anything to get where I am now. Now, my accent is not perfect, but it's not as obviously it's not as thick. It's not as obviously polished as it was before. So that's pretty good. And after she asked me that question, I was thinking about it a little bit. And I think I have a clue of how to do it and how I did it to some extent without maybe being fully aware of it.
Huh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So first of all, I think it starts with giving a shit. So that's not a great discovery, but I think a lot of people just don't try. They don't try to mimic the way people speak in a different language. They learn the words, but they don't try to learn the sounds and just the way you articulate things. So just caring makes a huge difference, because on some level, even if you're not practicing it specifically, you'll pay some attention. You'll be more aware of how you sound and how other people sound, and you'll try to get better over time, right? But the big thing is, I think the framework of deliberate practice works perfectly here. Now, I didn't know about it at the time, but now that I know it, it makes perfect sense. So we'll link in the show notes to the episodes where we discussed deliberate practice. But you need a feedback loop.
Yep.
Step one, gather data. So listen. You just have to listen to how others speak and pay attention to the atoms, the smaller parts, not the full words, but to how the sounds sound like in a given language, right? And then you speak, so you practice, and you gather more data. You listen to yourself, right? You try to repeat the same word, the same phrase, and you compare. You listen to the differences in how the two sound like, and you create this self-feedback loop. And the thing about it is, the more you listen, the more you care, and the more you pay closer attention to the sounds, the more you develop a mental models of those sounds, right? Because for a lot of people are stuck in a kind of narrow kind of sound vocabulary they have in their language. And when there are similar sounds in different languages, they'll just be okay with the closest approximation in their language, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, in English, R is a very different R from the R's in most languages. In Polish, you'd say ar, right? It's kind of the same, but also very different. Or the H sound. In most languages, it's going to sound like h, And in English, it's like, huh, right? It's different. Most people won't notice immediately. That's why you have to pay attention. You have to pay attention to the differences, right? And again, once you start understanding the sounds, when you have kind of mental models of the nuances of the sound and articulation and pronunciation and tone, it will be easier for you to replicate it. Even, still your skill will always lag behind your taste. So your hearing, you'll hear that you're not quite there. You'll hear the differences, but you won't be able to replicate it just yet. But noticing the difference, so listening and seeing the differences, the nuances in the sounds is key, is the first step. Only then you can improve how you speak, at least if you want to do it in any reasonable sort of time, and not by doing it fully organically, which is by fully immersing yourself in a language and then taking 15 years living in a country before you start sort of but still not quite sounding like them, right? You have to listen. And in recent 2.5 years, what made a huge difference for me is making this show, recording the podcast, because it's a great feedback loop. Because I listen to every episode before it's out, right?
We do, yeah.
Yeah. And so I hear, especially at the beginning, but still today, but at the beginning, I just heard so many things I do wrong. The wrong words I used, or better word I could have used, or something I screwed up in grammar. And also sometimes, I'd also notice how I don't pronounce things quite right, that they don't sound quite native, not as good as I would like them to be. And having this feedback loop every week for 120 weeks makes a huge difference. But even before that, just caring and paying attention makes a difference.
Yeah, I think that's why it's so helpful when you can travel to a country where they speak the language, or where you can talk to native people who are speaking this language. And I think just being around people, you start caring about how they sound. And and what I realized in my English is more Polish American when I just speak with non-native speakers. Mm-hmm. When it's more American when I speak with Americans. It's more British when I speak with British. It's funny, but it's true. Like my accent changes adjusts depending on who I speak to, and it's really funny. Especially when my daughter she goes to an English school, and she has a perfect British accent. So whenever she's reads something to me, I try to read it in the same way. So like on the British, more British way. And I have here a few British friends, and it's the same. When we speak, the more we talk, the more my accent changes a little bit, just towards a more British side. But still, I would say that also, again, I'm a movie buff, so really watching movies helps me get my accent, because I want to speak like Tom Cruise, or I want to speak like Harrison Ford or whoever. So I repeat the phrases that they say, and I repeat them in the same way they do. And of course, it's not perfect. It's not like I'm not Harrison Ford, and no, I don't have a voice of Dustin Hoffman. But still, it helps to repeat, and to just repeat and try to mimic them.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. I've noticed myself many times speaking English much better, not in terms of just grammar, but in terms of accent when we record a podcast. And the longer we record a podcast on the day, the better I sound like, because just kind of mentally switching from one language to another, it just takes my brain a while to fully adjust to a different sort of sound vocabulary, right? If you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. Now, here's one thing I will highly recommend for anyone who wants to improve at that. We'll put the link in the show notes to an IPA table. That's IPA as an International Phonetic Alphabet. So oftentimes in on Wikipedia and in serious dictionaries, you'll see you'll see words written in IPA, which kind of characterizes different sounds. And I found a link to an IPA table where you have all of the letters in it, which has all of the different kinds of R, or all of the different vowels that are in between different vowels, or a lot of the different sounds that only some of them that will be natural for you in your native language. And you go through it and play every sound and try to replicate it. This helps a lot because you'll be much more aware of the differences. Like not just listening to one language, but you have in the IPA table like 5 different things that sound kind of like R but not quite. And you listen to it and you really listen to it. And again, this is how you develop those mental models, the understanding of the differences in the sounds. You listen to them side by side and you notice the differences. And then you try to replicate those sounds. And with that, over time, you develop more kind of vocal flexibility by doing this as an exercise, because it will take sort of stretching of your abilities to do that, because for however long you live, you've only really learned to perfectly say the sounds in your native language. And as you try to replicate those other sounds, those similar but different sounds, you will start to understand intuitively how your muscles shape your lips, move your tongue. You will develop a more intuitive understanding of voiced and unvoiced consonants, all of the things like that. I highly recommend going for the IPA table. I wasn't quite aware of it. I only trying to think of an answer to the listener question. I recalled that I did do that in the past, and I did found it sometimes, this table, fascinating, how many sounds there are in different languages that are, and so some of them are just completely out of whack, but most of them are just in this uncanny valley that they sound like a sound I know, but I can't do that. And then I can, right? But it takes practice to do that.
Well, there's a bonus here as well. So to all listeners of the podcast who are Polish or Polish-based and Polish with mother tongue of Polish, we have a good thing. We have lots of sounds in Polish. Lots of difficult sounds like we have all these sounds that many people cannot fathom to pronounce. So we have an advantage here that we can really learn to speak things very well. Like I here in Spain, the Spanish, they have very limited sounds. So whenever they learn English, for them it's really difficult to replicate the English sounds. I compare them to Portuguese, who just live next door, and Portuguese, a similar language, but already has this João, and all these sounds. And Portuguese, when I ask them to say a Polish word, they just say it. They just say it, and they say it almost perfectly, like from the get-go, because they have the sounds, they understand the sounds. So we as Polish are pretty fortunate that our language is so freaking difficult that, and not only to learn to speak, but also really learn to literally speak. That's why we have the advantage of learning the accents of other languages pretty well. Like in my experience with German, I had to really pay attention. When I was studying in Germany, I had to really pay attention when people were speaking to really improve my German, to really pronounce the same way that they would do it. With Spanish, it's easier because Spanish is a very like a singing, is a kind of a singing language. Not as singing as Italian, but it's kind of it has a very nice rhythm to it. And in Spanish, sometimes I can really pass as a native, but it's hard. On the other hand, because the way I look, I'm just this blonde guy with blue eyes. So like by seeing me, they don't expect me to speak Spanish. When they listen to me, they're surprised that I speak as a native or almost as a native. So it's easier because the language is like that. But again, I had to pay attention to get there.
The last two things I thought of that might have contributed to my English accent is First of all, I remember having some. I mean, I still have like some just fleeting interest in beatbox, which is this like completely random thing. But when you think about it, like when you try to learn how to beatbox, you have to really extend your vocal flexibility. You have to learn how to make a lot of sounds which might not be part of any natural language. But again, you have to become more flexible
with your vocal ability.
Yeah, with your vocal ability in general to be able to do that. I also remember kind of in primary school, me and a friend of mine kind of for fun trying to replicate like all sorts of fake accents. So like try to speak things with a fake Russian accent or a fake German accent. Now I won't try to present that because like it's embarrassing, but it's kind of funny because it's another thing that might have just been us kind of playing in primary school or middle school too. Probably yeah. But again, you extend your vocal flexibility. You by trying to replicate a fake accent, even speaking your own language, you learn different sounds.
Totally.
Yeah. All right. So speaking of Spanish, why don't you finish the story of how you've learned Spanish? Last week we discussed English and German, but what about Spanish?
The long story, or the origins were that when I was young, like really as a small child, I remember that I had this, map, actually a whole book of countries. And by just browsing through the book, I realized that many countries share the same language as an official language. So I started, I created a table and I wanted to know how many languages, for example, like how many countries have English as their official language. And then what I realized is that the top three languages are English, Spanish, and then German, French, and other languages. But bar none, English and Spanish. And so I knew that, okay, I'm learning German now, but at some point I will have to learn Spanish because like the whole, America Latina speaks Spanish, and Spain speaks Spanish, and 1/3 of USA speaks Spanish. So I knew that I had to learn it.
Yeah, just a quick update. Looking at Wikipedia, a list of languages by total, not native, but total number of speakers. Number 1 is Mandarin Chinese. Number 2 is English. Then Hindi Urdu, and then number 4 is Spanish. So, but there's 530 million people or so in the world that speak Spanish.
Exactly, but in my case, I was just counting the countries, and China is one, China. So I didn't realize, and at that time, I didn't realize that Chinese was so important anyway. So Spanish is really really useful. So I signed up for a course, like for a traditional course in a university. So I was like I was 19 in university to learn Spanish. I knew that I didn't sign up for a course to learn German because I already knew German and I didn't want to learn it more. Actually, I did, but then later I just signed up for a special course for German. But Spanish was my new language to learn. And I remember the first year I was having fun going to the classes. The teacher was from Peru. She was very nice, and we had fun. But I remember the second year I wasn't learning that much anymore. I wasn't motivated much. But then I went to study in Germany, and when I started studying in Germany, I met some nice Spanish people, and I hang out with them a lot. And in the second semester, actually, one of them moved in to the next door from my dorm room. So we were sharing a dormitory, and the next door he was there. So we would speak a lot. I mean, he would learn some German, but we would also learn some Spanish. So it was fun, and I realized, okay, I want to study in Spain. So I managed to persuade my German university, to send me as an Erasmus student to Spain. And so as a Polish guy, I was sent as a German student to study in Spain. But of course, my Spanish was really poor. I faked it. Fake it until you make it. So I had an exam, which was funny because it was an exam in German. A Spanish exam in German. So it was like just just level of abstraction is really high up there. So it was fun, but the teacher was convinced that, okay, I spoke some Spanish, I should be fine. And of course, when I came there, I wasn't that fine, because I went to a lecture, I didn't understand a word. Completely, because I knew I had some really basics, Spanish, and then I was a lecturer at a university. So I was sitting there and I couldn't understand anything. And of course, the professor wouldn't slow down. Spanish is a pretty fast language. So the professor wouldn't slow down for 5 Erasmus students out of 300. He wouldn't. Yeah. So he would just speak in a normal pace, and we would just listen in a normal pace and not understand anything in a normal pace. But I did a few things to really speed up. So of course, first of all, I moved in to a dormitory, to an apartment with Spanish people. So I was forced to speak Spanish again with my neighbors. So it was first thing. Second thing, I signed up for Spanish classes, extra Spanish classes. They were not obligatory, but I signed up anyway to have the Spanish classes anyway, to have the grammar structure. I knew it wouldn't be my main way to learn Spanish, but auxiliary. It helps to learn the grammar. Third, I started. I like Spanish. Music in Spain. So I was. If I liked a tune, I asked my Spanish friends who was the artist and whatever. And it was before iPhone, Spotify, and all these things. So I would look it up. I would download the lyrics of the song which I liked, and I started learning and studying the song. So it was really funny, in the first month of being in Spain, when there was a very popular tune, and I would sing it, and the Spanish would be like, this guy barely speaks Spanish, and he knows all the words in this song. They were really surprised that I knew. But again, if you think about it, this is brilliant, because a song has a rhythm. It's really easy to memorize things when you're singing a song. True. It's very easy. It's natural. It's like for the brain, it's just a perfect way to memorize things. So I would memorize songs, and
and you like singing songs, so for you especially.
Exactly. So I would really study the songs, and then it was the moment when in Spain they had this a competition like for amateur singers, Operación Triunfo. It was a competition for singers, so I would watch it every week to just learn about new songs and like new songs that I liked, and then just to download the lyrics from the internet and study them. So so that was that, and in my university I would go to every lecture. I had no clue what they were saying, but I would go anyway. So I was priming myself just to listen to the lectures and what we discussed in the last episode, get the language, get the style that they're saying, things to just adjust myself to this Spanish that they are saying, right? So I wouldn't miss a lecture. And it was funny because really the first month, nothing. Like really, not like Radek. It wasn't like a little bit. Really, I had no clue what they were saying. Nothing. But surprisingly enough, the second month, I was getting it. I was getting what they were saying, more or less. So it was like the improvement was pretty fast. And there was another thing that I did. Two more things. So another thing, every day I would watch a movie in Spanish television, and it was American movie, and especially I was choosing American movies which I knew. I knew what the movie is all about, but it was in Spanish without subtitles. Again, something we discussed in the last episode. So I like and in Spain they dub each movie, so they have voice for Harrison Ford, for Bruce Willis, for whoever. So it's the worst, but for somebody to learn, it's perfect. Bruce Willis here speaks in perfect Spanish to you, perfect. So so I would watch the movies, and I knew what was happening because I already knew the movies. But thanks to that, I could capture the context and the phrases and everything else. So I was focused on that. So every day, like as a homework, I would watch a movie. And then one last thing I did, and it was really brilliant. In one of the classes, there was an assignment for the whole semester. It was a whole semester assignment. And the teacher said, we should choose 3 to 4 people to do the assignment together with them. And the typical situation with Erasmus, so exchange students, it would be that the exchange students will be together, because they know crap. So let's like misery loves company, right? So let's group together. Well, I didn't do that. I saw 3 nice girls grouping together. I went to them and I said in my awkward Spanish, "Hello, I am boy Poland. I want with you in group together," right?
Thank you for the simulation of your broken Spanish. That was great.
So I was like that, and the girl said, "Yeah, we are 3. Yeah, the group should be 3, 4. Okay, you can be together." So, and I was lucky because these girls were really diligent. So we would meet every week for this assignment. This was kind of an assignment we would do in a week tops. And we would have it done. Like I would do this assignment, in a few days, and if just a few hours a day, it would be done. No, but they were thorough. They wanted to meet every week, like for the whole semester. So I had completely free, tutors for Spanish and girls that speak a lot every week. And 2-3 hours I was with them. And of course, I was the only boy, and especially from a different country. So they would ask me questions. They would ask me for things. Like, I was forced to speak. I was forced to speak up and to say something. So it was cool. It was cool, and it pushed me out of my comfort zone completely. So as you can see, I did many tricks at the same time to quickly improve Spanish. Because I knew that, because the thing is, with an exchange program like this, at the end of the semester, there are exams in Spanish from these things that you're from the things that you signed up for. So you better learn Spanish quickly, because then you're just gonna fail. So that was so I had all these techniques lined up together, and I was using them, firing at all cylinders.
Wow, that's pretty good. I seem to notice a pattern in your learning of languages. A lot of movies and a lot of songs.
Yeah, it works,
and it doesn't surprise me at all. It's a very Michael thing to do. Lots of songs and lots of movies. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, studying is hard.
All right, so I guess we should make a quick update on my learning of Spanish.
Exactly, because remember, we had an episode where you came from Panama, and we will link in the show notes all your how your vacation went, and then I was keen to ask if you might be considering studying more Spanish, and I was actually surprised how you picked it up.
Yeah, well, the thing is that I was like, no, I'm not learning more Spanish, but I was bit by the bug, and I couldn't help it. I didn't plan on it. I didn't want it. I didn't want it as a sort of a serious project because I feel like I need it, or because I think it's even worth it. But I started doing it because it's fun. It's so much fun. And here's the thing, the thing with Spanish is it's both a more difficult language than I thought. I'm not saying, difficult. I'm saying more difficult than I thought. All of the conjugation for all of the forms of verbs, there's a lot of that. And it's a lot to go through. Especially at the beginning, where you just can't pick up the patterns very easily. And at the same time, I can learn Spanish much more quickly. And I mean, way more quickly than I thought I could. I thought I would give up quickly because it would be hard, and it would be hard, and it wouldn't be fun. And without the motivation of feeling like it's important, I couldn't do it for long. But it's been over a month, I think, and so far so good. And it continues to be fun because it's really just not very hard at all. And the thing is that, I think there's a few things that contribute to that. First of all, it's the technique. I learn right now pretty much only through Duolingo, and we'll get back to that. So that's one reason. The other reason is it being your third language and not your second language makes a huge difference.
It does,
because I know two languages fluently, which gives me two things. First of all, it gives me a very big vocabulary. And English, I seem to recall that something like 60 or 70% of English vocabulary are cognates from Romance languages, right? So they either come from Latin or from some other or from Spanish or French or whatever, a lot of languages from French. And Spanish, obviously, is a Romance language. And so there's a lot of overlap. And especially, it helps to know English well. Because just like in Polish, there's a lot of relatively sophisticated words that come from English or maybe from Latin that are just normal languages in English, right?
Exactly.
And same in Spanish. There's a bunch of words that exist in English, but are relatively sophisticated that come from Latin, right? And are just regular words in Spanish. So if you know English a little bit, you might not feel that. But when you know English well, then once you start paying close attention, you see so many cognates. Right? Like a lot of words which are not obviously the same, but when you start paying closer attention, then you see that, if you ignore the suffixes and if you change the vowels, then it's almost the same. It also helps to be at least a little bit aware of how languages morph, because you might notice that there's groups of sounds, of consonants that morph between each other. So like k, c, sh, s, those four words, they often morph between each other, right?
Yep.
Or in Spanish, the y sound is written as double L, and a lot of those words come from words that had L, not y. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, there's a word cebolla, which means onion. And that's nothing, but cebolla is pretty much the same as cebula in Polish, especially once you start paying closer attention. The y is the same as l, and the s is the same as c. And in Italian, I believe it's cipolla. Again, sounds different, but it's the same once you pay closer attention, right? So there's that. And also, it's not just the words, but knowing well the grammar of two languages, because you can pick up patterns very easily. Again, an advantage of having Polish as your first language is that Polish has a very hard grammar, has so many different modes and aspects and so many different conjugations and so many irregular conjugations for so many verbs. And so a lot of things in Spanish that would be, someone who only knows English, when learning Spanish, they would have to understand new concepts of how you have these conjugations where you have different endings and different tenses, where in English you have just the S, the ed, and the ing suffixes, and then it's all just mixing and matching of to be, to have, etc. Right? In Spanish, it's more difficult, but for me, knowing Polish, it's like, it's the same as in Polish, right? There are some other things that don't exist in Polish, but are the same as in English, right? And so by mixing and matching, I think so far there's only been one thing that kind of confuses me, because I haven't seen anything like that. But again, having these two different experiences helps a lot, because if there's just one, it's not just that there's less of it to compare to, but if you only know your native language, you're not aware of its structure. Mm-hmm. Like they try to teach you that at school, but no one pays attention. But if you know two, then you start just understanding grammar, like how in different languages different things are formed in different ways.
Completely. I mean, when I was in Spain learning Spanish, I remember in the Spanish course, I had there was a girl sitting next to me. She was Scottish, and she saw my dictionary, and it was an English-Spanish dictionary, and she was like, "Why would you have that? Why don't you have a Polish-Spanish dictionary?" I was like, no. The English and Spanish are more similar, so I prefer that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then she was like, really? and you know, and there are so many examples, as you said. You know, there's so many words. Like even like the whole families of words. Like, you know, description, descripción, attention, atención. Like all of them are like just the same. Or for example, maintain, mantener, detain, detener, obtain, obtener. So like there are just so many like families of words that are just exactly the same as well, not exactly, but if you pay attention, they are like exactly the same in English. So
many adverbs, for example, exactly, exactamente, all of the lis and the mentes are pretty much the same.
Exactamente, perfectamente, perfectly.
See.
So with that, as you said, it's fun to discover that. And it's easier to learn. So like you take the mental model, you almost have it. Like you just copy it and paste it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I had to like kind of rediscover certain things about Polish, because you know when you don't learn languages, you just speak your native language. You forget the structure that they try to teach you at school. And I had a few things where like, yeah, this is similar to Polish, and now I'm analyzing how this works in Polish. And kind of rebuilding the mental model, and like, oh, okay, now I know.
For me, for example, the best mental model from Polish to Spanish was the fact that in Polish, just like in English, just like in Spanish, we don't say I have. We just say have, because because the verb changes for me, for you, for different persons. So you don't have to say I have, because by saying have, everyone knows that it's all about you. That's what you're saying. So for English speakers, I remember it was hard to do that. You know, not to say I have. You know, and for me, at the beginning it was hard, but then I realized, yeah, it's like in Polish. I don't say it, right? Yeah, and that was it.
Yeah, so many little things, like in Spanish, like in most languages, but not in English, nouns have grammatical gender. So there's that, and it works very similar to Polish. It's very regular, unlike German, for example.
Exactly.
Or the fact that adjectives change to match the number and the gender of the noun. So in English, you say, I don't know, yellow cat or yellow cats. The yellow doesn't change. And in Spanish, you'll say un gato amarillo or los gatos amarillos, right? The S changes, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, this is the same in Polish. So it's like, oh, okay, that makes sense, right?
Yeah, completely. So, so this is really easier to copy. And but another thing that I think played a big part was the app, right?
Yeah, it made a huge difference. So I mentioned last episode about the spaced repetition software, and Duolingo like takes it to even greater lengths.
Yeah,
like it's the method I mentioned is still great for when you're trying to do the leap I did, like just improving your vocabulary. But for starting to learn, Duolingo is so great, so fun, so simple, and actually works for me anyway. First of all, it's just fascinating to me that you can learn so much with Duolingo, even though it contains no explanations, zero. It doesn't explain you one thing about grammar, about anything. It just shows you concrete examples, concrete kind of tiny exercises, and all of the learning of the structure, of the grammar, of the endings, everything, you pick up through your natural ability to pattern match, right? You learn the same way a child learns, just with the advantage, just much faster because we're adults, right? And because it's computer aided, which is another thing. And it's just fascinating to me because children learn this way, and even though children when they're small, they're so useless. They can't do anything. Still, they can pick up a language so fast, relatively speaking, right? And then they teach you as, high schoolers for so many years a language, and you don't pick up anything. And is it because those tiny toddlers are smarter? I don't think so. Maybe it's because the method of learning things in school in a very structural way of explaining grammar and thing is just broken.
Yeah, I mean, I was so surprised that before going to Spain, I was hanging out with my friends, and some of them had did maturity exam, like it's the most important high school exam in Spanish. So their Spanish was really good. And I was like, wow, these guys speak Spanish so well. I wish I could, go there and learn some. When I came back after a year in Spain, we would speak Spanish just, for kicks. And I was thinking like, how come their Spanish is so crap now? I was surprised that their level that I thought was so great wasn't so great because they learned like the grammar way, the old school Polish way, not the intuitive way, and not the way you would learn as a toddler or with native speakers. So for me, when you showed me the Duolingo app, this was the convincing argument. When you said you will learn like a child does, I'm like, okay, this is something for me because I have a problem. I mean, my problem is I don't speak French, so I don't know if it's a problem, but to me it is because, I'm very often surrounded by French people, and every time I am, they are reluctant to speak English. They prefer to speak French, and I don't speak French, so I'm out of the out of the question, and it's frustrating to me. Maybe I'm just strange, but it's whenever we go to France with my wife or with my kids, whatever, I'm frustrated that I cannot just say anything. I just don't speak French at all, and just the sheer fact. I mean, just for you, like remember when you were in Panama and you could say something, you could ask for directions or whatever. It was already liberating. You could already do something, right?
Yeah.
And in French, I just have this. I have this like hate relationship with French that I never decided to learn it, and I know for a fact that, again, which is said, that because I speak Spanish and English, French is the middle ground. It should be really easy for me to learn French because I have everything that it takes to actually get it. So with Duolingo, I'm giving it a try. I'm not as fast as you are. I'm not learning every day. Although when I was on vacation, I was learning more than I thought I would. But again, thanks to Duolingo app and the computer aided style of it, the bots that I just discovered today, and then all these things that they do, and the fact that I don't have to spend lots of time on it. I can spend like 5 minutes a day or 10 minutes, and it's already more than enough. It's amazing how much progress I've made as well. It's what's even more amazing, I really like it. I really enjoy it. I really enjoy speaking French. Learning to speak French. So I'm really in the very beginning yet. But now I'm really motivated, and I really want to make sure that at some point I will be able to have a conversation, like a normal, proper conversation in French, and not be embarrassed by it.
Yeah. So for those that never saw Duolingo, what you have there, like the sort of exercise you have, is mostly you have a phrase in English, and you have to translate it to Spanish by picking words that you have available, and there's some words that you must not use, right? And sometimes it's the other way around. You have a phrase, a sentence in Spanish, and you translate it to English. Sometimes you have the same thing, but you don't have words to pick, but you have to type it on your own. And sometimes when you have a sentence like that, but with a new word, you can just kind of peek to see a translation of just this new word. Sometimes you select the correct translation from a few options, and there's a few other exercises, but it's mostly like that. And the great thing about it is that it is also spaced repetition, but first of all, it's broader because you have full sentences and you're learning the whole thing and not flashcard style. But it's also implicit. It's implicit spaced repetition. They don't ask you directly about how well you remember a word or a phrase, and they don't show you that. But on the website, you can look it up. You can see all of the words you've already kind of discovered in all of the lessons. And under the hood, they track your recollection of every single word. So they will track how many, I assume they will track again how many times you've had a word, how many repetitions, when was the last one, and also how many times you've messed up or maybe thought for a very long time until you answered a sentence with that word, right? And because of that, it's not just that you have your regular, that all of the lessons and all of the examples are sequential. They're mostly sequential, but in between them, sometimes they will repeat the same phrase, but like the other way around, like in a different style, but the same phrase. And sometimes they'll have very often in between those exercises, they'll have one where you have to match pairs of words, translations.
Yeah.
And you'll have some of the words which are part of the current lesson and words which are that you've learned before. And I'm pretty sure they use the spaced repetition tracking data to show you the words that are in most need of a repetition for you to still remember them.
Yeah, I mean, just today I had a special. I mean, I just saw that. I thought I completed the basics section, and then I saw there was additional lesson in one of the basic sections. So I clicked on it, I tapped on it, and it said that you had problems with these words. So we have a special lesson for you, just so you can repeat them again. So it was like an additional lesson for me. So I would just go through this lesson, and it consists mostly of the words that I had trouble with. That was true. So I could repeat them again and again and again and learn them and then pass to another level. So it was, I'm sure that they're doing all that, and it's magical. It's really good.
Yeah, and you have kind of lessons grouped in grouped together. So you have one lesson and like 10 different sections in it that you go through separately. And after you complete it, it just kind of turns kind of gold that you've completed it. But over time, I'm not sure if you got to that point, but after you complete more, over time, those lessons will kind of lose their strength. So that they have a kind of bar.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
This will happen today.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they will lose their strength, and then you'll have a practice session.
Exactly.
That will have the same things you had in the lesson, but only selected based on the ones you had problems with.
That was it. What I just discovered today. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Another thing that makes Duolingo really interesting is that they have gamified the crap out of it.
Oh yeah.
They have used every psychological trick that makes, things like social media, Facebook, all of the crap games, pay to play or free to play crap games on App Store so addictive. And they've used all of the same tricks for productive use.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
So, for example, first of all, you have points.
Yep.
And you select your goal for the day. You have streaks, and they want to really push you to. Yeah.
The goal for today, that was the best part. In the beginning, you have to commit how much you want to learn. So for example, I chose 5 minutes as a beginner. So beginner, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, intermediate, 15 minutes, advanced or serious. I don't know what and then 20 minutes, insane. Like, really?
Yeah.
20 minutes of a language every day is insane.
Yeah. Especially that it says 20 minutes, but actually it means 40 points, which is like 4 like little kind of chapters in a lesson. And at least for me, learning this language, I'm pretty sure it's less than 20 minutes.
You see?
Yeah. So I usually like for this last week, I think I had something like 400 points or something. So
wow, you're motivated, man.
Yeah, but here's the thing: it doesn't take much motivation because it's fun, right? And like another thing it does is you have like a health bar, and when you make a mistake, it kind of decreases your health. And when you get to 0, you can't learn new things anymore. And like this might be annoying at first, but here's the thing: there is no point in learning new things if you don't remember the stuff you're supposed to have just learned, right? And so what you should do is practice. But practice seems like work. However, if you run out of health and have to go through practice to regain health, now it sounds like it just pushes the right psychological buttons to make it seem not like a chore, but like something you want to do.
Yeah.
And it really works. It really works on me. And it's like so fun. And especially like when I'm going through a new lesson, a new chapter, I need a bit more focus. But when I'm just going through like practice session, like repeating the stuff from previous ones, it takes so little time and so relatively little attention that it's a thing I do almost compulsively, but not really, because it's hard to call it compulsive. And instead of like when I just have a random 3 minutes and I want to play around with my phone, instead of going to Instagram, I go to Duolingo, right? Instead of going to Twitter, I practice the words from the previous lesson.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take something to motivate me. It's just, again, it just pulls the right tricks to make it obvious, right?
Yeah, I just confessed before we recorded the same thing that now my phone is my Duolingo thing. I pick it up and I start doing Duolingo. So yeah, completely. I need to try to find more time to and then more consistency to really every day to have a streak. But this should be pretty easy because I have my motivation with my Apple Watch, so I should have a similar motivation with that. But it's really cool.
I usually do it in the morning, during breakfast, or at night before going to bed, or maybe when I'm eating dinner or something like that. So I'm literally just substituting it in places where in the past I would browse Twitter or something of that kind.
Yeah, it's really cool. And when you think about it, that you already have a level that you can really communicate. We start sending messages through iMessage, in Spanish already. So it's so much fun. So before we end the show, because we're running late as well, like when I was learning Japanese, because I was traveling to Japan, I did also this repetitive learning. It was Pimsleur course. So it was Pimsleur, audio course. And it was good, but it didn't have the computer edit thing. It was like, it was exactly predefined, right? So it was okay. And it helped me get to a certain level of Japanese in a very short period of time. But it was pre-decided before. And with Duolingo, it's not. With Duolingo, it's computer aided, which as you said, it's really is key. But what I wanted to end this show with, if you feel like ending it, is the fact that it's not only fun to learn another language. It gives you a better comprehension of not only the language, but also people from the other countries, and the culture and everything else. And it gives you power. It gives you power in a way that you can now go to this person and then just talk to them, and then like in so many times in my life, I've had this situation where I had to get something done or talk to somebody, and they were just surprised I would speak their language, and it makes friends instantly because people are more friendly to you when you try to speak their language. They just we Polish, we know that our language is so difficult, and whenever somebody tries to speak something in Polish, just say cześć or dzień dobry or whatever. Like, we're so happy, that they're trying.
Especially that almost no one does this, and seeing that is just amazing, right? Like, wow, really?
Exactly. And with Spanish, for example, this is now talking to American audience. With Spanish, like 1/3 of Americans speak Spanish. So like, probably most of the people who are serving you food or are helping you at the hotel or somewhere else speak Spanish. So by speaking Spanish, you can get to them, you can talk to them easier, and you can understand them better. And of course, it's just easier. It's just easier, and it gives you this power, but the power in a good way. A power to connect with people in a cool way. And I have many stories, but just to not to tell them now. Just this fact of it's better to know more languages than, even the basics than not. And apps like Duolingo and, things like that can really make it not a chore, but a fun thing to do.